I think there are several key fears that people have, one of them being that I'm missing out on something that everyone else has, right? Or that everyone else is experiencing. I think another one is the fear that I will not be validated, that I will not be seen as valid, I will not be respected by the people around me. And so I start basing all my decision making around what will make people impressed with me, what will make people respect me, what will make people see me in this way that I want to be seen, that I want to be viewed. And so you can find yourself in situations where you are picking life situations for yourself that are not fulfilling, but they are just trying to assuage that fear that if I do this, then people will respect me. If I do this, then people will look up to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
My parents will approve of me.
Yeah.
My classmates at my 20-year reunion will be impressed.
Yeah.
And
I think that's one of the, you mentioned like younger people, right? So
Yeah.
somebody that would be, we'll call it college age, somebody that we'll say early 20s, right? Where you're making career decisions or your educational, secondary educational decisions or permanent relational decisions. That's one of the tough things about that is because you really are, we're fighting for self-awareness all of our lives, but in that season, you're really trying to sort out what was ingrained in me,
yes.
what I was trained for, groomed for, what I was told to believe. Like I'm just starting to uncover some of my assumptions that may or may not be true.
And that's the time when I'm
And
supposed
that's
to
the
make
time I'm
these
making
huge
these big decisions, right?
Right.
And that's why I would say, like, I think that's good work to do.
Yes.
I try to, the best I can, through God's word on Sundays and through our church, like try to help people with that journey because it is a lifelong journey.
It is.
But I think once, if you do that work, it's definitely helps you be a lot more clear-headed about other big decisions. And so, but I think like, making those then, that's why I say like, you're going to get some of this stuff wrong. I mean, lots of people major in something and don't do anything. They end up going a different route. They have, again,
And the world
that's
doesn't end.
Yeah, that's something I think is interesting about the day we live in now because our parents' generation, grandparents' generation, it was very common to start at a company or start a job and that's your whole career, 30, 40-year career. And now, people change 4, 5, 6, 7 times.
Absolutely.
So I think that's not that changing in and of itself is necessarily the right thing, but the fact that that's normalized, that people don't feel like, well, I have to get it right when I'm 23, or 22 or whatever. Like, I'm going to go try some stuff.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say one time, it was like, try everything you can, or, try a bunch of things in your 20s in terms of, again, career and what you're good at. Just try a lot of stuff. And in your 30s, really start to zero in on what you're good at, and in your 40s, really start making a difference.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's got to be 10 years, but you get the general idea, right?
Yeah, the point stands regardless. Because for some people, that timeline will look radically different. Maybe you and I have had this discussion as well, where for me, that timeline has been somewhat interrupted just because of the nature of our family. We have 2 kids with special needs, and so me being kind of their primary caretaker at this point in my life, like that season is a lot longer for me than it typically would be for someone with a kid. Like your kid grows in independence a lot faster. And so I have not had a level of independence to pursue some of these other things until just recently. It's started to open up a little bit more. And so that's been a longer timeline. I just turned 40, and there's probably a lot of things that I will try and then hopefully start getting good at in my 40s and 50s, right? It's going to be a little bit different. I will say that is one thing that I'm thankful to my parents for, is that it never felt like pressure to pick your thing and stick with it forever from the beginning. When my parents met, my dad was in a hair band. I mean, he was like a legit rocker, you know, and that was his thing. And my mom taught baton twirling, and that, you know, she had her own corps and she had started it from nothing, and that was kind of her thing. Then my dad moved on, and he was managing an apartment complex, and he worked for Home Depot for a long time, and he, you know, did things with his hands. And I remember my mom always used to talk about like what her next thing that she wanted to do would be. Like she always said, she's a very good writer. And so she always said, sorry, I got something in my eye. She always said that she's like, you know, maybe someday, like when I'm done being a baton teacher, I want to like write greeting cards. She's like, I know that's like a random thing. She's like, but I love writing the short little meaningful poems and things that would go in it. And so I always heard that dreaming of, I will change path, you know, in my later years, 40s, 50s, 60s. There's not an end to it. And so I kind of just always grew up like, not even consciously, but unconsciously thinking,
That's
yeah,
normal.
you can change a bunch of times. Like, you don't have to know what you want now and stick with it forever. What you want now, you might do for 10 years. And then it's something else.
Well, I think sometimes the fear would be that if you pivot, especially if it's a hard pivot, that somehow those 10 years or whatever that you sowed into this business
Were
or this entity over here were completely
yes.
wasted, right? And I think rarely is that the case. I think for the
agree.
most part, there was a lot of things that, even though it may not be hard skills that were directly transfer into your new job or your new direction, there was a lot that was going on in
A lot of
terms
soft skills, yeah.
a lot of soft skills, a lot of lessons being learned
Yeah.
that kind of put you ahead over
Yeah.
here, right? So I think, again, coming back to the fear of getting it wrong early on, I think part of it is going like, if I do pivot in 10 years or 5 years or whatever, this isn't wasted. Not only the skills I picked up, but the process I went through
Yes.
is shaping me as a person.
Yes.
It's deepening me as a person, and much of that will be useful
Yeah.
in this next endeavor. So I don't have to worry that I'm going to get 5 years down the road and that I just
That it was
literally
lost
threw away
time.
5 years.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really good. Are there any other, before I pivot and ask a follow-up question, are there any other kind of core fears that you think you want to touch on with that? I mean, we've talked about fear of missing out on things, fear of being behind, fear of this lack of respect or validation. Is there anything else that kind of jumps to mind for you?
I mean, I think looking into particularly family and just even the people that you feel a need to honor or be approved by, make them proud.
Yeah.
And to go, how much of this is being driven by, my desire to meet someone's expectations, and
Yeah.
who would that be, right? It might be a family member or somebody that you revere or whatever. And I think also there's also connection to, at some point you admire someone, at some point you look up to someone and you look at their life and you perceive how they feel, and so you want to feel what they feel, or
Yeah.
you want people to look at you the way that they look at them.
Yeah, so you
And-
emulate that.
And so it's sometimes like, again, a desire to have that that can kind of lead you on a wild goose chase sometimes,
Yeah.
or that lead you down paths that maybe aren't the best paths for you.
Right.
And I get that. I think that stuff can be very confusing. And that's why I think, having the willingness
Yeah.
to dig into that and to question it, wrestle with it, and try to get clear so that I'm not doing something from a sense of, trying to do the right thing,
Yeah.
and yet my perspective was off.
I think another common motivation that is maybe a little less categorized as a fear, but is a motivator for some of our big decision making that I see is people who want to honor someone
Yeah.
that's in their life. So my dad, my grandpa, my
Yeah.
everybody was a firefighter, everybody was a police officer, everybody was a doctor, everybody was a lawyer, everybody. So this is like our family heritage, and I need to follow in those footsteps. Or another one sometimes I see is like, I always knew that my mom wanted to do this and she never got to, so I'm fulfilling that. Well, you can't live someone else's life on their behalf. And I get it. There is a nobility to it.
It's coming from a good place,
It's coming
but
from a place of love, but there is nothing that you can do that will somehow right what was wronged in another setting, or even what you perceived as a wrong. And so I think being aware of how some of those motivations that are not bad things can also sabotage you and make you choose a life for yourself that isn't really a fit for you. It's something that you do out of a place of honor or whatever for someone else. And the reality is the biggest honor that you could give them is for you to live a whole and fulfilled life.
Yeah. I think that's why, again, what we do as a church community is part of that iron sharpens iron. It's a lot of times, when you get in and you get close with people and you really know each other really well, and you take something like this that it is kind of confusing, jumbling around in your head, and to talk it out and to receive various perspectives and to think it out, talk it out, pray it out, and to continue to turn it over. And it might take time, and then all of a sudden that clarity starts to emerge. But I think when people isolate and they try to sort it all out in their heads, a lot of times it can be tremendously confusing. I've found a lot of value in processing stuff with whether it's a confidant or a coach or somebody, or again, us talking it out, where you work these things out and people are able to speak into it, and maybe something's clear to them on where they're close enough to you to know you, but a little bit on the outside. But all of a sudden they can speak something that you didn't see because you were just right in the middle of it.
Okay, so here was my follow-up, specifically for people who they are a person of faith, they do have belief in God, and you hear them struggling because they feel like one of two things. Either I felt like God specifically told me to do this, and then it didn't work. And so now they're struggling with, like, did I mishear? Did he not direct me? Did I assume something? And so they feel confused and lost and frustrated, or they also sometimes feel shame, feel like they let God down. And then the other one is, I don't feel like God is giving me clear direction. So what do I do next? Because I've always been taught I need to wait until the Lord moves me. And so now what do I do? Because I don't feel like he's saying anything to me. I don't hear him. What do you say to people in those two situations? Yeah,
no, that's a great question. And I think every sincere follower of Jesus wrestles with that at some point, right? Okay, so let's start by just calling some stuff out.
Okay.
Communicating with God, who's a spirit, is confusing, and you're not going to bat 1,000. So let's compare it to. Let's start with this. You and I have been married for 20 years. We are together all the time, pretty much every day. We talk a lot. I know you really well. You know me really well. Most of the time, I'm pretty clear in our communication. I know your facial expressions. I know why you're not saying what you're not saying. I know, I could teach a whole class on communicating with you.
Yeah.
We both speak English. We have physical presence, so I can read your body language. I can read your eyes, the whole deal.
And I can speak articulately and directly to you.
100%.
Yes.
And we still miscommunicate.
Yeah.
Quite often, right?
Yeah.
We still don't hear what's being said or
Yes.
hear what's not being said.
Right.
So if that's the case, how much more am I going to, at times, miscommunicate with God, who's not physically sitting with me, who's not speaking in an audible English voice? I'm dealing with impressions that I'm getting in my spirit. I'm reading God's word and really trying to contextualize his heart to my reality. I've got the Holy Spirit that's, working in me. But again, everybody's dealing with trial and error when it comes to that. So whatever you do, don't conclude that if I'm a little confused by these messages I'm getting from God, it's because he doesn't like me, or it's my fault. If I was smarter or I was more spiritual, I would just be dialed in.
Yeah.
Bible characters and every Christ-loving, Spirit-filled person you know miscommunicates and misunderstands from time to time.
Yeah.
So let's not have this be catastrophic.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it, and I don't want to be overly repetitive, but if I can know what my fears are and I can be self-aware, it helps me know where I'm prone to confirmation bias. In other words, if I want the thing to be true, if I want the thing to be right, and I'm driving down the road and I hit 5 straight green lights, I go, therefore, man, I really wanted to move to that new city.
I passed a billboard with that word on it.
And I prayed, Lord, give me a stop or a go. And then I drove and I hit 3 green lights. Oh, you know what? We're moving to California.
Yeah.
So again, what am I? I'm prone to confirmation bias because I want it so bad. Well, why do I want it so bad? Because it'll validate me.
Yeah.
So I think the more we can get that and sort of purge ourselves of our confirmation bias, our preconceived notions, and really kind of come with a blank slate.
Yeah.
Now I don't have noise drowning out
That's
the
really
voice
good.
of